Hello everyone, and welcome back to Haunting Tales. Tonight, as you sink into the shadows of your room, as the night wraps itself around you, I have a question. Are you truly alone? Before you drift off, leave a comment below telling me where you're listening from, if you're still there. And if you enjoy these eerie tales, be sure to like and subscribe, because sometimes the things that lurk in the dark are watching, listening, waiting. And speaking of things lurking in the dark, let me take you into a tale that will make you question every creak, every whisper, and every shadow in the corner of your room. I never thought I'd end up back in that town again. I grew up in a forgotten little place called Darlow Hollow. Surrounded by deep woods and misty hills, it always had a strange pull, like something alive was breathing beneath its soil. I left when I turned 18 and swore never to return. But fate has a twisted sense of humor. It started with a letter. No name, no return address. Just my name in shaky handwriting, and inside, one sentence scrawled in red ink. You left something behind in the woods. The words rattled something loose inside me, something I'd locked away years ago. I told myself I was just going for closure. Just a short visit, one night in Darlow Hollow. But it's never just one night. When I arrived, the town hadn't changed much. The same crumbling houses, the same rusting gas station signs swinging in the wind, the same smell of damp earth and forgotten dreams. The people, those who hadn't left or died, watched me from behind curtains and cracked windows. They knew I didn't belong anymore. I rented a room at the Hollow Inn. The woman at the front desk stared at me too long, like she recognized me but couldn't quite place from where. Her hands trembled as she gave me the key. Don't go out. After dark, she whispered. I forced a smile. Right. Because of the wolves? She didn't laugh. No, because of what follows. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I walked to the edge of the woods. Everything came rushing back. The tree we carved our names into, the mossy path we used to race down, the spot by the creek where we buried something. I couldn't remember what we buried, just that there were three of us, me, Daniel, and Rachel, and something went wrong. The memories were like shadows, there, but not solid. I pressed on. The deeper I went into the woods, the quieter the world became. The birds stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I reached the clearing. That's when I saw the shoes. Two small, dirt-covered shoes placed side by side in the grass. Children's shoes. And just behind them, half buried in the soil, was a box. I dropped to my knees and dug with shaking hands. The box was old, wooden, rotting, tied with a red ribbon now faded to pink. I pulled it free and opened it. Inside were three things: a Polaroid photo of us, as kids, a dead crow, and a torn piece of paper. We promised it a soul. My heart turned to ice. I heard a twig snap behind me. When I spun around, there was nothing, but the shoes were gone. I ran. I made it back to the inn just before nightfall. The woman at the desk wasn't there. Her chair sat empty, spinning slightly. I went up to my room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the box. What did we promise? Who or what did we promise it to? That night, the dreams returned. I saw Daniel's face, pale and twisted, his mouth stitched shut. Rachel standing in the woods, whispering something over and over, her eyes black pits. And the sound? Wet, sucking, growling from somewhere just behind me. When I woke, my sheets were soaked in blood, but I had no wounds. I found Rachel the next day. She never left Darlow Hollow. Still lived in her parents' house, though it looked like no one had touched it in years. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. Her hair was gray, her eyes sunken. She stared at me like she'd been waiting. "You came back," she whispered. "What did we do?" I asked. She led me inside without answering. The house smelled of mold and rot. In the living room, photos hung askew on the walls, each one slashed with a knife. "We made a pact," she said, sitting in a worn armchair. "In the woods, with the thing in the ground." I shook my head. That was just a game. Rachel laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Not to it. We promised it a soul, one of ours, to keep the others safe." I felt sick. "So, who did we give it?" Her eyes met mine. "Daniel. He drowned," I said. She leaned forward. "Did he?" I remembered the day we found him, floating in the creek, his mouth full of black water. But now I saw something else, his hands gripping mine, his eyes pleading as I pushed him under. I ran. Back in my room, I locked every door, every window. But it didn't matter. That night the scratching returned, under the bed, inside the closet, beneath the floorboards, and then the voice. I never agreed. The room twisted around me. Shadows stretched, grew teeth. My reflection in the mirror moved on its own, smiling when I wasn't. The lights flickered. The air turned cold. I dropped to the floor screaming, clutching my head as the whispers filled my mind. One soul, still owed. You. I woke up in the woods. I don't remember how I got there. The box was beside me, open. Inside it now, just my picture and the torn paper. One soul, still owed. You. I tried to leave the woods, but every path leads me back to the same clearing. The trees don't let me go. The air doesn't let me breathe. I'm still here, writing this, hoping someone finds it. But if you do, don't come looking. Don't answer the letter. The next tale will take you to a place where identity is only the beginning of terror. I moved into the apartment because it was cheap. Too cheap. The building sat on the edge of the city like a forgotten relic. 5 floors tall, made of crumbling gray stone and weather-beaten wood. It looked more like something that should have been condemned rather than inhabited. But I didn't have options. I'd lost my job, my lease was up, and my bank account was gasping. The landlord, a gaunt man named Mr. Helsley, smiled too wide when I signed the papers. No pets, no loud music, and no visitors after midnight, he said, tapping each rule on the contract with a yellowed finger. Especially not from that mirror in the hallway. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. Sparse, but functional. A single bedroom, a cramped kitchen, and a living room that echoed too much. Everything smelled like mildew and something faintly sweet, like overripe fruit rotting in the walls. I ignored it. That first night, I heard footsteps. They started around 2:17 a.m. Every step was slow, deliberate, like someone dragging their heels down the hallway just outside my door. When I peeked through the peephole, no one was there. But the footsteps kept walking and walking until they faded down the hallway. Every single night, I tried earplugs, white noise, sleeping pills. But the footsteps didn't care. Then I started noticing the mirror. It was large and old, set into the hallway wall just across from my apartment. I hadn't paid much attention to it at first. But one night when I stepped out to investigate the footsteps, I saw something wrong. In the reflection, my door was wide open. I turned. My door was shut tight, locked. When I looked back, the reflection was still open, and there was someone standing just inside. A pale figure with hollow eyes smiling directly at me. I blinked. The mirror was normal again. Things got worse after that. Lights would flicker when I walked down the hall. Shadows would shift in corners where no furniture sat. And always, the mirror showed things that weren't there. One night I stared into it for too long. I saw myself standing still. But my reflection blinked out of sync. It tilted its head in ways I never did. It whispered things I couldn't hear, but somehow understood deep in my chest. I backed away, heart racing, and saw something even stranger. My reflection didn't follow. It stayed there smiling, even after I'd stepped away from the glass. The dreams began next. I was walking down the apartment hallway endlessly, the walls melting, the lights turning red. The mirror grew larger and larger until it filled everything. I could see 1,000 versions of me inside it, some screaming, some laughing, some bleeding. When I woke, there were handprints on the inside of my bedroom mirror, not mine. I tried to talk to the neighbors. One of them, an old woman from 3B, stared at me with haunted eyes. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. "The reflection?" I nodded slowly. She opened her door just wide enough to show dozens of cloths covering every mirror in her home. Even the toaster was turned to the wall. "You can't let it in," she whispered. "If it mimics you long enough, it'll replace you." I asked her how to stop it. She looked at me sadly. "You don't. You just hope it gets bored." The following night, I caught my reflection leaving my apartment. It waved to me, and then it vanished. I screamed, pounded on the glass, but nothing changed. When I ran to the hallway to tell Mr. Helsley, his office door was open, but his chair was empty, spinning slowly in the dark. Then came the banging. From inside the walls, from beneath the floors, from behind every mirror. The next morning, the world felt off. People didn't recognize me. My phone didn't accept my fingerprint. My voice sounded different when I spoke into a recording. And when I looked into the mirror, wasn't there. I'm writing this now from the hallway outside my apartment, because the reflection won. It waits inside my unit, living my life, sleeping in my bed, smiling when the mailman delivers a package. Sometimes I hear it talking to my friends on the phone with my voice, laughing. And when I scream from the hallway, no one hears me, because I don't exist anymore. Not to them. I am only a reflection now. So if you ever find yourself in a place that rents for too little with a mirror that shows more than it should, turn away. Never stare too long. Never let it learn you. Because once it does, it doesn't want to leave. It wants to become. But don't breathe easy just yet. Something darker waits just beyond your bedroom wall. You'll hear it crawling closer tonight, and once you do, then you'll never sleep the same way again. I never believed a home could be evil, not haunted, not cursed, evil. But then, I hadn't yet moved into apartment 3B on Orland Street. The building was tall and narrow, pressed between two crumbling warehouses like a book someone tried to forget. I found it listed online under a heading that simply read, "Low rent, no questions." Perfect, I thought. I had just lost my job, my savings were drying up, and I was desperate to disappear. When I arrived, the landlord, a man named Mr. Wexler, met me at the door. He wore a suit that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in decades, and his face was off. Not ugly, not strange, just a little too symmetrical, like a mannequin made by someone who had seen a face once, but never really understood it. 3B is quiet, he said. Very private. The last tenant left a few things behind, but you'll manage. I signed the papers and moved in the same day. The first thing I noticed was the mirror. It hung in the hallway, tall and narrow, framed in black iron vines that curled like claws. It looked ancient, and something about its glass shimmered wrong, like there was more depth to it than there should be. I caught my reflection pausing half a second too late when I walked by. I should have taken it down, but I didn't. The first night I heard breathing. Not mine. Not from the street. From inside the walls. Heavy, slow, and wet. Like someone drowning, over and over. I turned on all the lights and checked every room. Nothing. Still, I left the kitchen light on when I went to bed. The breathing stopped. Until I turned it off again. By the third night things had escalated. I found muddy footprints in the hallway, bare feet, too small for an adult, too long for a child. They led from the mirror to the bathroom and disappeared into the drain. The next morning, my toothbrush was soaked in blood. I called the landlord. He answered on the first ring. "I'm hearing things," I said. "Seeing things." 3B is private, he repeated. She likes it that way. I didn't ask who she was. I hung up. That night, I tried sleeping with headphones on, music blasting. At 2:13 a.m., the music stopped, replaced by whispering, not coming from my ears, but from under the bed. I yanked the covers over my head and shut my eyes. I could feel something watching me, pressing down on the mattress. Its breath was cold and smelled of wet soil and rust. When I finally got the courage to look, nothing but the mirror. The mirror showed a shadow sitting on my chest. A week passed. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I avoided the mirror, but it didn't matter. I'd see movement in the reflection of the toaster, the oven door, my laptop screen. Something was trying to be seen. I decided to investigate. In the hallway closet, behind a false panel, I found a box. Inside were dozens of Polaroids, all of apartment 3B. Each one showed someone different in the same spot by the mirror. Each photo was darker than the last. The last picture was of me, sleeping in bed, mouth open, something black crawling from the mirror toward me. I hadn't taken it, and I slept with the door locked. I started leaving the apartment during the day. Libraries, coffee shops, even the park bench felt safer. But every night I had to return, and every night the apartment grew colder. I tried blessing the place. I'm not religious, but I lit candles, muttered prayers, even tried salt. The salt turned black. I dreamt of her that night. She crawled out of the mirror, her limbs bending wrong, eyes hollow, jaw split wide with teeth like broken glass. She whispered my name over and over, her voice layered, echoing like a chorus of dead children. I watched them all. Now I watch you. I confronted Vexler. "You knew," I shouted. "You knew something was in there." He didn't deny it. 3B is hers, he said. She needs someone to feed on, to reflect. That's the deal. You signed. I threatened to leave. He smiled. "Try. You'll be back before sunset." They all come back. I tried. I packed a bag and ran. I made it to the bus station, bought a ticket to anywhere. As the bus pulled away from the curb, I looked out the window. Apartment 3B was across the street, waiting. No matter how far I went, I always found myself back at that door. Time didn't pass right anymore. Days melted. My phone stopped working. My reflection aged while I did not. She was taking pieces of me, memory by memory, word by word. Soon I'll forget my name. But before that happens, I needed to write this. to warn you. If you ever see a listing for apartment 3B, don't look in the mirror, and if you do, never turn your back to it. Some homes don't need bricks or wood, some are built of pain. And if you think the horrors are over, think again, because what's coming next has been buried deep, waiting to claw its way into the light. You ever get that feeling like something's wrong in the air before you can name it? Like when you walk into a room and just know someone's been crying, even if the tears have dried? That's what it felt like the first night I heard it. Breathing. I was house-sitting for my cousin Joel, who had just landed a photography gig overseas and needed someone to look after his dog, Moose. Big, goofy thing. Half German Shepherd, half Labrador, all bark and no brains. Moose was the kind of dog who'd growl at a leaf but roll over for a burglar. That's why I knew the sound I heard that night wasn't from him. It was coming from the walls. Not in the walls. From them. As if the house itself had lungs and it was struggling to breathe. I'd been at the house for 3 nights. Nothing unusual until then, just the quiet creaks of an old home, Moose's tail thumping when he dreamed, the occasional bark at passing cars. But on that 3rd night, something changed. It started just after 2 a.m. I'd just put Moose to bed and turned off the hallway light when I heard it, a long, ragged inhale, like someone gasping for air after being held underwater. Then silence. Then a matching exhale, slow and deliberate, like it had been holding its breath for hours. I froze. Moose did too. His ears perked, his head tilting toward the vent in the hallway floor. Another inhale, this time closer. I told myself it was just the plumbing, or old pipes, or maybe even Moose's snoring. But deep down, I knew none of those were true. It didn't sound like something in the house, it sounded like the house was alive. I started noticing things the next morning. The front door lock had been turned from the inside. Moose's food was missing from his bowl, though I hadn't fed him yet. My phone wouldn't hold a charge. Even stranger, some of the pictures in Joel's hallway had changed. Subtly. One portrait of him at Niagara Falls now showed the waterfall bone dry. Another where he stood with friends now had their faces blurred, smudged out like wet ink. I called Joel. No answer. I tried his email, then texted, then tried his parents. No one had heard from him in a week. But I'd spoken to him just days before I arrived. Hadn't I? The breathing returned the next night. This time it didn't stop. It followed me from room to room, never loud, never aggressive, just steady, deep, rasping, like a ventilator with a soul. It echoed through the air vents, came through the wood grain of the doors, whispered from behind the walls like someone trapped. I tried sleeping with noise-canceling headphones, but I could still feel it. Like its rhythm was syncing with my own, forcing me to match its inhales and exhales. I began having dreams. Dark, lucid things. I stood in Joel's hallway, except the walls were pulsing like lungs, the carpet sticky with something thick and warm. A voice whispered my name over and over, rasping, sickly. You're inside me now. I started researching the house. It had been built in 1926 by a man named Elijah Mercer, a doctor known for his obsession with breathing disorders, sleep apnea, paralysis of the diaphragm, collapsed lungs. He believed breathing was the soul's tether, and that by controlling it, you could control the passage between life and death. In 1930, he was found dead in the attic. His chest had been crushed inward, like someone had knelt on it and breathed him flat. The case was never solved. The house remained in the family, passed down through generations, each owner either dying mysteriously or vanishing. Joel bought it last year. Suddenly, his trip overseas made a lot more sense. On the fifth night, I found the breathing in me. I was brushing my teeth, staring into the bathroom mirror, when my reflection fogged up before I exhaled. My chest began to rise and fall on its own. I wasn't controlling it anymore. It was controlling me. I gasped, dropped to the floor, and Moose started barking like hell, snarling, spitting, growling at the air. That's when I saw the shadow, just behind me in the mirror. Tall, thin, its chest expanding, and every time it did, my lungs followed suit. I smashed the mirror. The shadow didn't move, but I felt something enter me. I tried to leave the house. I packed my things, got Moose in the car, and drove. Made it halfway down the street before the world shifted. One blink, daylight. Next blink, back at the driveway, like I'd never left. I checked my phone. Dead. Moose had stopped barking. He just stared at the house, ears flat. When I stepped back inside, the breathing welcomed me, like the house was glad to have me back. I haven't left since. I barely sleep. When I do, the dreams are worse. Joel came back last night, not in person, through the walls. His voice rasped from every vent, every floorboard. It takes you slow, he said. Takes you deep. You don't even notice. I begged him, asked how to escape. He didn't answer, only laughed. A shallow, wet laugh. This morning, I found the attic key in my pocket. I never put it there. I think I know what it wants. It wants me to go up there, to see what's been breathing all this time. I don't think I'll come back down. But before I go, I'm writing this. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe you're already listening. If you ever feel your lungs matching a rhythm that isn't your own, run. Because once it's inside you, there's no breathing on your own ever again. Some things don't kill you. They wear you. Slowly. Until there's nothing left but an echo in the walls, a sigh in the night, a breath that doesn't belong to you anymore. And speaking of things wearing skin, the next tale will take you to a place where identity is only the beginning of terror. I work at a lost and found office. Not a particularly exciting job, but it's quiet and I like that. I log misplaced items, umbrellas, backpacks, wallets, keys. You'd be surprised what people leave behind. Sometimes it's not just things. Sometimes people forget pieces of themselves. Let me explain. It started with a woman who came in on a Tuesday morning. She looked like someone I should know, familiar, but not quite right. Like a version of someone I once met in a dream. She had long black hair, the kind that looks wet even when it's dry, pale skin, and eyes. Her eyes didn't blink. "Did anyone turn in a phone?" she asked. Her voice was low, scratchy, as if unused for years. I asked her to describe it. She said it was red, cracked screen, a photo of her and her daughter as the lock screen. I checked the log. Nothing matching. "I'm sorry," I said. She didn't move. "I can take your name," I offered. Still nothing. Then she smiled. Not a warm smile, a knowing one, as if I'd passed some test. "No need," she said. "You'll see me again." And then she left. But she didn't. Because that night, when I got home, she was already in my house. I live alone. No roommates, no pets. No one has a key. Yet there she was, standing in my hallway, drenched like she'd walked out of a lake. "What are you doing here?" I choked. She didn't answer, just turned and walked into the bathroom, closing the door. Behind her, I called the police. Locked myself in my bedroom and waited. They searched the place. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No wet footprints, no woman, just me. They gave me a pamphlet. Stress-related hallucinations. Maybe I was overworked. Maybe I needed rest. But when I checked the mirror that night, my reflection blinked a second too late. The next morning at work, the red phone was on the counter, cracked screen, a photo of the woman and a little girl. No one had checked it in. I opened the photo. The woman was smiling wide, but the little girl looked terrified, eyes wide, mouth mid-scream. Behind them, in the reflection of the window, I saw my face, only it wasn't me. The eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep. The image flickered, glitched, and then reset. I tried to power off the phone, but it wouldn't respond. That's when it rang. The screen showed one word. Mother. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. And then the voicemail icon popped up. I played it. There was no voice, just breathing. Wet, slow, hungry breathing. I tossed the phone in the Dropbox and left for the day. But when I got home, the red phone was on my kitchen counter. Same photo, same voicemail. But now, there was a new picture. It was me, sleeping, from an angle that showed the foot of my bed. That night, I dreamed of drowning, sinking deeper and deeper into dark, still water. And at the bottom she waited. The woman, her skin sloughing off in sheets, her eyes cloudy like milk. She held out her arms and said, "You were always meant to wear me." When I woke, my skin felt wrong, like it wasn't mine. Too loose in some places, too tight in others. The red phone was in my hand. I tried to trace where the phone came from. The IMEI number was wiped. The manufacturer had no record. Even Joel, the IT guy with a hacker streak, couldn't trace a thing. He looked me in the eye and said, "This phone, it doesn't belong here. Like not in this world." I laughed, because what else do you do? But he didn't. He just handed it back, hands shaking. "Get rid of it," he said. "Bury it. Burn it. Just don't bring it back." I tried. I threw it into the river, watched it sink. When I got home, it was charging on my nightstand. The next week, things unraveled. My coworkers said I'd been acting weird, showing up late, speaking in a different voice. But I hadn't. At least, not that I remember. I reviewed the security footage, watched myself staring into space for hours, whispering things I couldn't hear, smiling when no one else was in the room. And worse, the woman had come back, again, and again, and again, except no one else saw her. But I did, and she looked more and more like me each time. I set up cameras at home. That night, I saw her crawl out from under my bed. Not walk. Crawl. Joints bent backward, her face twitching, warping, until it looked just like mine. She stood by my sleeping body, leaned down and whispered, "You'll fit perfectly." Then crawled back underneath. The footage corrupted right after. I don't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I dream of her skin peeling off and wrapping around me like a cloak. I can feel it tightening, and my face, it's changing. My eyes look darker, my skin paler. When I smile, it doesn't feel like mine. She's wearing me, bit by bit. Sometimes I wake up standing in places I don't remember walking to, talking to people I don't know, laughing at things I didn't hear. I think she's close now. I think soon. I won't be me anymore, just her, in my skin. looking through my eyes, telling her daughter, "Mommy's home." Some things don't want to kill you. They want to be you. And when you finally forget who you really are, that's when they move in. But the next story, the next one's different, because it's not about what comes for you. It's about what's locked inside you, begging to be let out. They said the symptoms would fade, that it was a minor reaction to trauma, nothing more than stress and exhaustion. They gave me pills, soft blue ones that left a chemical taste on my tongue and blurred the edges of my world. But the thing, you can't sedate what lives beneath your skin, and you can't drown what doesn't breathe. It began 3 months after the accident. I was driving home from work, rain hammering the windshield, the radio murmuring something soft and slow. A deer ran out, too fast, too close, and then everything went black. I woke up 3 days later with a fractured rib, a sprained wrist, and 22 stitches across my forehead. But something else woke up inside me too. They released me with a clean bill of health. No brain damage, no internal bleeding. But I didn't feel whole. Not anymore. At night, I started hearing noises inside my body, not in my ears, inside, like scratching beneath my ribs, whispering through my veins, a slithering sound in my skull. I told myself it was phantom pain, stress, but when I touched the scar on my forehead, it moved. I tried ignoring it. I kept to my routines, work, sleep, repeat. But my reflection started to lag, not all the time. Just in those quick glances, like when I passed a mirror in the hallway or caught myself in the screen of my phone. It would blink after I did, tilt its head the wrong way. Once I saw it smile when I wasn't. That's when I stopped turning. The lights on at night. One morning I found something under my fingernails, flesh, not mine. Pale and slick like something peeled from a wet wall and carved into the skin of my forearm, though I have no memory of doing it, was a symbol, a circle with a slit in the center, like an eye that never blinks. I scrubbed it until the skin bled, but the next day it was back. I went to a specialist, Dr. Havel, a neurologist who dealt with rare perception disorders. He made me talk for hours, asked strange questions. Do you ever feel like you're watching your life instead of living it? Do you hear thoughts that don't feel like yours? Then he gave me a mirror. He made me stare into my own eyes. After 5 minutes, he told me to stop. I hadn't blinked once. That night I heard the voice. It came from inside my mouth, not through my ears, not in my head. Inside. It said one word. Soon. I bit down so hard I cracked a molar, just to make it. Stop. Blood filled my mouth, but I swear it tasted sweet, like copper and honey. I found myself doing things I couldn't explain, locking myself in the bathroom and scratching at the walls, whispering in a language I didn't know, waking up with dirt under my feet and gravel in my sheets. One morning, I woke up with a message carved into my back, backwards, like I was looking at it in a mirror. I am awake. I started researching ancient symbols. The eye in the circle led me to something called Naaroth, a name not written in most books, found only in fragments of banned texts, whispers from cultures long gone. They said Naaroth was a god that never died, not because it was immortal, but because it slept inside things. People, wormed its way in during moments of trauma, cracks in the psyche, a parasite of the soul. I remembered the crash, the blackout, the dream of a mouth that opened inside mine. I stopped sleeping after that. My body started changing. I couldn't feel cold anymore. My pulse slowed to an unnatural, rhythm. My reflection, when it wasn't mocking me, started to look older, like it was living more life than I was. Once I watched it breathe after I stopped. Then the dreams came. I was always in a field. Black grass swaying under a red sky. And in the center, a tower of flesh. Pulsing, groaning, covered in mouths whispering. Secrets I could never remember when I woke. And something at the top, watching, waiting, wearing my face. I decided to end it. I drove to the coast, climbed to the cliffs, took one last breath, and jumped. But I didn't fall. The world twisted, bent inward, and I woke up on my bathroom floor, completely dry. My clothes, folded neatly beside me, and in the mirror, the reflection was gone, but I could still feel it and smiling. I don't leave my apartment anymore. It's safer here, contained, but even here it finds me. Last night I pulled a tooth from my gum. Behind it was an eye. It blinked, and I saw the field again, and the tower, and myself at the top of it, feeding. I'm not writing this for help. It's too late for that. I'm writing this to warn you. If you ever feel something moving beneath your skin, if your thoughts echo in voices not your own, if your reflection starts acting like it has a mind of its own, it's already too late. You're just a cocoon now, and the thing inside you, it's almost ready to hatch. But what happens when the cocoon splits? When what's born is not what anyone expected. In the next story, someone tries to stop the darkness before it spreads, but some shadows don't like being chased. I've never been alone in my house. That's the first thing I realized after moving into the old Victorian on the hill. It was everything I could have wanted, spacious, full of character, and at a price that seemed too good to be true. The landlord never said much about the place's history, and I didn't think to ask. It was just a house. Or so I thought. From the very first night, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't sure what it was. Maybe it was the way the stairs creaked, like someone was walking up and down them at odd hours, or the strange hum that seemed to echo through the walls. But it wasn't until the first night I tried to sleep that I realized there was something else here with me. It started innocently enough. A sound, barely perceptible, like the soft tap of fingers on wood. At first I thought it was the house settling. You know, those old creaks and groans that happen in the night when wood and metal contract in the cold. But then the tapping grew louder, more distinct, more deliberate. I lay there in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was nothing, that I was just imagining things. But then I heard it again, and this time I realized this wasn't just the house creaking. This was someone, or something, moving through the house. The sound came from the staircase. I held my breath, straining my ears, waiting for it to stop. But it didn't. It kept going, each tap a little louder than the last, until I could almost hear the weight of someone's footsteps on the stairs. I turned my head toward the dark hallway, but all I could see was the faint outline of the stairs leading up to the second floor. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long in the dim light of my room, as if they were moving with a life of their own. The footsteps stopped. I waited, my heart thundering in my chest. The silence was unbearable. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure standing at the top of the stairs just out of sight. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and I could only make out a vague outline, but I could feel its presence. Cold. Watching. I tried to call out, but my voice wouldn't. Come. My throat was tight, suffocating, and I couldn't make a sound. The figure began to move. It was slow at first, its movements jerky, like it wasn't quite sure how to walk. Then it came closer. Each step sounded like it was echoing through the walls, like something enormous was walking toward me, and then it was gone, disappeared into the shadows. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in place, too terrified to move. The only sound I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. When I finally worked up the courage to leave my bed, I rushed down the hallway to the stairs, my pulse racing, my breath shallow. But there was nothing there. No one. Just the empty staircase with the soft moonlight creeping in from the window, casting long shadows across the wooden steps. I was alone, or so I thought. The next few days were a blur. I tried to push the incident out of my mind. It was probably just a bad dream, I told myself. Maybe I'd imagined it in the dark, but the noises continued. And they weren't just confined to the stairs. At night I could hear whispers, faint, unintelligible voices that seemed to come from nowhere, the sound of something or someone moving through the house. I thought I was going insane, but then it happened again. This time I was in the kitchen. I was standing by the sink, washing dishes when I heard it, a heavy sigh like someone was exhaling behind me. I whipped around, my breath catching in my throat, but there was no one there except for the first time I noticed something odd. The air in the room had changed. It was colder, heavier, like the temperature had dropped suddenly. And then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move across the wall, a tall figure, with a shape I couldn't quite make out. It wasn't my reflection. It was something else. I turned sharply, but again, nothing was there, just the empty kitchen. The shadow had disappeared as if it never existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. The tapping from the stairs echoed in my mind like it was coming from all directions. I couldn't escape it. I decided to do something I'd been avoiding for days. I went up to the attic. The door creaked open and the air up there was thick with dust. The old floorboards groaned under my weight as I stepped forward, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. I scanned the room, looking for anything that could explain the strange occurrences. Then I found it, a small wooden box, hidden beneath a pile of old newspapers. It looked ancient, like it had been there for decades, maybe longer. My hand trembled as I picked it up. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't the dark stain on the side of the box. It looked like something had been smeared across it. Something dark, something alive. I opened it. Inside was an old photograph. It was yellowed with age, and the edges were frayed. In the photo, there was a figure standing at the top of the stairs. But it wasn't just any figure. It was the same one I had seen. The same tall, shadowy presence that had been watching me. I stared at the photograph, feeling the air in the room grow colder with each passing second. And then, I heard it. The footsteps. Louder. Closer. I turned and saw it standing there. The figure, watching from the top of the stairs, but this time, I could see its face. And it wasn't just a face. It was my face. I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. The figure is always there, watching, waiting. I can hear its breath when the silence is thick, feel its presence when I'm alone. I don't know how much longer I can stay in this house, but I think the figure is waiting for me to make the next move. I've read about these kinds of things. Shadows, entities. They feed off your fear. They wait for you to give them what they need. And if I don't find a way out, I'll be the one feeding it soon enough. Some things never let you go. They creep in, like a shadow at the edge of your vision, until you're too terrified to look away. And in the next story, someone is about to discover that when you stare into the dark for too long, the dark starts staring back. I didn't believe in ghosts. At least I didn't used to believe in them. I'm not a skeptic by nature, but I've always been a realist. I'm the kind of person who looks for explanations, for logic. And when you grow up in a house where things go bump in the night, you learn to chalk it up to the wind or maybe the house settling. You never think that there could be something else, something you can't see, but you know is there. But then I moved into this apartment. It's an old building, the kind that's seen better days, the kind of place where the hallway lights flicker and the floorboards creak even when no one's walking on them. The rent was cheap, and the landlord didn't ask many questions, so I figured I could make it work. Besides, what could go wrong in a place like this? It started slow. A strange sound here or there. A whisper of wind when the windows were closed. At first I convinced myself it was just the house. It was old after all. But then, things began to change. The first night I noticed it, I was sitting on the couch, reading a book. The lights above me flickered once, then twice, before going completely out. I thought it was a fuse or a wiring issue, so I got up and checked the circuit breaker. Nothing was tripped. The lights didn't come back on, but I figured it was just a minor electrical problem. Nothing to worry about. But then the knocking started. It was faint at first, just a light tap, tap, tap on the wall behind me. I thought it was the pipes, maybe something in the building settling. But as the minutes went on, the sound grew louder, more insistent, like someone was knocking on the wall just a few inches from my head. I turned around, but the wall was empty. No one there. I checked the windows, the door. Nothing. I chalked it up to my imagination. It was just an old building, right? That was until the second night. I was lying in bed trying to sleep. The room was dark, but the moonlight came through the window, casting long shadows across the walls. It was peaceful, almost calming, until I heard it again. A soft rustling sound, like someone was moving around in the room. My first thought was that it was just the wind or maybe the sound of an animal outside, but then I heard it again, and again. The sound was unmistakable. Someone, something, was in my room. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I thought I imagined it. But then I heard it clear as day. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate footsteps, slowly making their way toward my bed. I turned my head slowly, but there was nothing. Just the empty space in the room. I felt my pulse race, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. My room was small. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. The closet was shut. The bathroom door was closed, yet those footsteps grew louder, closer. My heart hammered in my chest. I pulled the covers over my head, hoping to block out whatever was happening, but the footsteps didn't stop. They were right next to me now. I could almost feel the presence, like someone was standing at the edge of my bed just waiting. I didn't dare look. I didn't want to see what was there. I closed my eyes, willing myself to fall asleep, to wake up and realize this was just a nightmare. But when I opened my eyes, the footsteps had stopped. The silence was deafening. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried to act normal, but I couldn't ignore the sense that I wasn't alone. It was as if someone was watching me, waiting just beyond my sight. When I moved around the apartment, the shadows seemed deeper, more oppressive, as if they were creeping closer to me, pressing in. That night, things escalated. I was sitting at my desk, working late. The apartment was quiet, save for the sound of my keyboard tapping. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, but other than that, there was no sound. Everything was still. Then the door to my bedroom creaked open. I froze. My head snapped toward the sound. The door was ajar. I hadn't left it open. I slowly got up and walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The air in the apartment felt thick, like something was about to happen. I pushed the door open. Nothing. My bedroom was empty. The bed was made. The window was shut. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been in there. Something that had left just before I stepped inside. I looked at the closet. It was closed, the door slightly ajar. I stepped closer, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I don't know what I expected, but when I opened the door, there was nothing inside. Just empty clothes hanging on hangers. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But that's when I saw it. A small piece of paper folded neatly on the floor inside the closet. I picked it up, my fingers cold against the faded paper, and opened it. In shaky, uneven handwriting, the note simply read, "I'm still here." That was the moment I knew. I wasn't alone. I don't know who or what it is, but something has been following me. It's in the apartment with me, watching me when I can't see it. It's there in the corners of my eyes, just out of sight, waiting for me to turn around. Every night, it gets closer. I can hear the footsteps again, and sometimes I feel the cold breath on my neck just a hair's breadth away. I can't get out of this apartment. The door is locked, but it's like it knows where I am, no matter what room I'm in. It's always right there, just out of reach. Watching. Waiting. I don't know how much longer I can stand it. But there's one thing I do know. Whatever is in this apartment with me, it's not leaving. Some things, once they enter your life, refuse to let go. They stalk you, follow you, and wait in the dark corners of your mind until you're too afraid to turn around. And in the next story, someone's about to discover that even the most innocent of places can hold terrifying secrets. And some things refuse to stay buried. I used to think I was brave. At least until I moved into that apartment. It was the kind of place that made you question whether you'd lost your mind. Not because it was run down or the neighborhood was sketchy. No, it was the kind of place where you felt like you had no business being. But there I was, standing in front of apartment 217, the key heavy in my hand, staring at the faded door. The landlord hadn't said much when he handed me the key. Just a terse, "It's ready. Don't ask questions." That should have been my first clue. But I was desperate. My last place had fallen through, and I didn't have time to be picky. So, I moved in. At first, everything seemed normal. The creaky floors, the faint smell of mildew in the hallway, the cracks in the ceiling, all the usual signs of an old building. But there was something about room 217, something that felt off. It started with the silence. I would come home from work, expecting the usual hum of the city outside. But there was always an eerie stillness in the hall. No sounds of footsteps, no music from neighboring apartments. Nothing. The silence was suffocating, like the whole building was holding its breath. At night, it only got worse. I'd lie in bed listening to the clock ticking on the wall, waiting for sleep to take me. But every time I started to drift off, I'd hear it. A soft, faint knocking. It came from somewhere in the wall or maybe the ceiling. At first I thought it was just the house settling, but the knocking was too rhythmic, too deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks, then silence, and then after a few seconds another round of taps. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing. The house was old and old houses made noises. But each night the knocking grew louder, closer. It started to sound like it was coming from inside my apartment. I checked every inch of the room, the closet, the windows, the walls. There was nothing, no sign of anything that could explain the noise. But the knocking didn't stop. It kept me awake night after night, the rhythmic sound of something tapping against the walls just beyond my reach. It wasn't a rat. It wasn't the pipes. It was something else. Something far worse. I started to avoid the room altogether. I'd go out more often, even when I didn't need to, just to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the apartment. But the knocking followed me, like an invisible presence, waiting for me to return. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront whatever was making the noise. I stood in the middle of the room, heart pounding as the knocks echoed through the walls. Tap, tap, tap. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice shaking. The knocking stopped. I held my breath, waiting. My eyes scanned every corner of the room. The silence was unbearable. Then, a voice. It was faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around, but the room was empty. My heart was racing, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I stepped toward the wall where the knocking had come from. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The silence was deafening. And then, from the corner of the room, I saw something. A figure. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just a shadow maybe, but no. It was standing in the corner right by the window, its features hidden in darkness. It was tall, thin, with long, unkempt hair that hung like tattered curtains over its face. Its arms were long, far too long, hanging at its sides like they didn't belong. I couldn't see its eyes, but I could feel them, staring at me, deep, into my soul. I froze. I couldn't move. My body refused to obey. Then the figure spoke again. "You're the one who doesn't belong." I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed by fear. The air in the room grew colder, like something was sucking the warmth from my skin. "You shouldn't have come back," the voice whispered again. And this time, I could hear the malicious undertone. I tried to speak, to ask what it wanted, but my throat felt tight like there was no airlift. The figure began to move slowly, deliberately. It glided across the room, its feet not touching the floor. As it got closer, the air grew colder until my breath came out in visible puffs of frost. And then, it reached out. Its long fingers brushed against my cheek, cold as death. "You shouldn't have come back," it repeated, the words now a chant echoing in my mind. I stumbled backward, my legs buckling beneath me. I fell to the floor, unable to take my eyes off the figure. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing closer with every second. The knocking started again. Tap, tap, tap. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. The figure reached for me again, its bony hand stretching toward my throat. And then suddenly, everything stopped. The figure vanished. The knocking ceased. The air in the room returned to normal. I lay there gasping for breath, staring at the empty room. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands trembling. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but when I finally stood up, the room felt wrong. I don't know if it was a nightmare, or if something truly was there with me. But I know one thing for sure. I'm never going back to room 217. Some Things live in the spaces between walls. They wait patiently for the next person to cross their threshold. And in the next story, someone is about to uncover the truth behind the things that should never be uncovered. I never believed in ghosts. I used to laugh at the idea of spirits and hauntings, dismissing them as the overactive imaginations of people who couldn't tell the difference between reality and fear. But that was before I moved into the house, on Ashcroft Lane. The house had been abandoned for years. Or so I thought. It was my dream home. Or at least it seemed that way at first. A beautiful old Victorian house, with its faded yellow paint and creaky wooden floors. The kind of house that you'd imagine in a ghost story. I always loved the charm of older homes, so when I saw it on the market for an unbelievably low price, I didn't hesitate. The agent didn't say much about the place, just that it had been empty for a while and needed a little work. I figured that was normal. Old houses have character after all. I paid in cash, no questions asked, and moved in a week later. From the first night, there was something off. It was small things at first, the kind of things you dismiss because they don't make sense. The way the air in the house was always cool, even in the heat of summer. The way the curtains in the living room would move as if they were caught by an invisible breeze, even though there was no draft. The strange faint tapping sound I would hear late at night coming from upstairs. I told myself it was nothing, just an old house settling or the wind catching in the rafters. But there was always that sense of being watched, a pressure in the air that never seemed to go away. Things got worse when I started fixing the house. I was repairing the old attic, cleaning out the dust and debris when I found something strange. An old brass lamp that didn't seem to belong. It was small, ornate, and covered in a thick layer of dust. But what really caught my attention was the faint swirling design on the base. Something about it intrigued me. I took it downstairs and tried to clean it, but no matter how much I wiped, the dust didn't seem to come off completely. I thought it was just grime from years of neglect. So I polished it harder, and that's when I heard the first voice. It was a whisper, barely audible at first, but unmistakable. "Turn off the light." I froze, the rag in my hand falling to the floor. I looked around, but there was no one there. The house was silent, save for the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my chest. I shook my head, trying to brush it off as my imagination. But that night it happened again. I was sitting in the living room, trying to relax after a long day of work, when I noticed something. The light in the room was dimming, flickering as if the bulb were about to burn out. I reached to turn the knob on the lamp, but before I could, I heard it again. The voice. "Turn off the light." I stood up quickly, my stomach twisting. I looked around, the air suddenly heavy with an unseen presence. The lights flickered again, then went out completely. In the silence that followed, I could hear a low, steady hum coming from the direction of the attic. I didn't go upstairs that night. The next morning, I tried to rationalize everything. Old houses had electrical problems, right? And my mind had probably been playing tricks on me with the whispering. But I couldn't ignore the strange things happening in the house anymore. I started to see figures out of the corner of my eye, shadowy, shapes that moved when I wasn't looking directly at them. There was something unsettling about the way they would always disappear when I turned to face them. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I went up to the attic to confront whatever was happening. The door creaked as I opened it, and the air in the room hit me like a cold wave. The lamp I had found was sitting in the center of the floor, glowing faintly, its brass surface warm, to the touch. As I approached, I heard the whisper again, this time clearer than ever. "Leave." The light flickered once more, brighter until it was nearly blinding. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step back, my legs trembling. The whisper didn't stop. In fact, it grew louder, filling the room until it was deafening. Leave, now. And then, just as quickly as it started, everything went dark. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the pitch-black attic, but when the lights finally came back on, the lamp was gone. I stumbled back down the stairs, feeling a cold sweat break out on my skin. I could feel it, the presence, the oppressive weight of something ancient, something angry that had been waiting for me. The next day, I did some research on the house. It wasn't long before I found the records. The house had once belonged to a family, the Ashcrofts, who had lived there for generations. But what struck me was the story of the previous owner, the one who had disappeared under strange circumstances nearly 50 years ago. The woman's name was Evelyn Ashcroft. According to the records, Evelyn had been obsessed with the lamp. She believed it was the key to unlocking a hidden power, something that could give her eternal life. But the night she tried to use it, she vanished without a trace. The authorities had searched the house, but they never found her. Her disappearance was chalked up to her own delusions, but I knew better now. The lamp was more than just a trinket. It was cursed. I tried to leave the house the next day. I packed my bags, intending to leave it all behind. But as I reached the front door, I felt it, the sudden, unbearable weight of the house pushing against me, holding me back. The lights flickered again, and I saw the figures once more, standing just out of sight. The door wouldn't open. I turned, desperate now, and that's when I saw it. A dark figure in the hallway, its features obscured by the shadows, but I could feel its eyes on me. It was watching me, waiting for me to make a move. And then, the voice. Stay with us. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was a command. I ran. But I knew, even as my feet pounded against the floor, that I wouldn't escape. The house was already inside me, the curse already taking hold. I could feel it growing, wrapping its tendrils around my soul. As I write this, I can hear the faint tapping from upstairs, the sound of the lamp calling to me. I know what I have to do, but I'm too afraid. I've become part of the house now, part of the curse, and it's waiting for you too. Some things, once they claim, you never let go. And sometimes when the night is too quiet and the wind stills, you can hear them calling from the dark. I've never been good at handling change. It's one of those things that's always managed to unravel me bit by bit. But when I moved into the old house on Elm Street, I thought it was different. The house was small, quaint, and tucked away, at the end of the block, so far removed from the hustle and bustle of the city. It had that lived-in charm, the kind you only find in places that have seen generations pass through. I wasn't even looking for a new place when I found it. Something about the for sale sign caught my eye, and before I knew it, I had the keys in my hand. It was perfect for someone like me, alone and looking for peace. I didn't mind that the house had been abandoned for a while. The floors creaked, the paint was peeling, and there was an odd smell in the air. But I didn't care. It was cheap. I could make it work. It wasn't until I moved in that I noticed something odd. It was in the hallway, at the far end of the house, just outside the bedroom door. A large, ornately framed mirror hung there, taking up almost the entire wall. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just a mirror after all. But there was something about it that didn't feel right. It wasn't the reflection. It was the way the air around it seemed to thicken, like it was always a few degrees colder near the glass. At night, I would hear soft creaks from the hallway, and sometimes when I passed the mirror, I could have sworn I saw movement in the reflection, just out of the corner of my eye. I'd stop, blink, and nothing would be there. but the feeling lingered. Ignored it. It was just an old house, right? The first incident came a week after I'd moved in. I was sitting in the living room reading when I heard a crash from the hallway. I rushed out expecting to find something had fallen, but the hallway was empty, the mirror hanging silently on the wall. I checked the floor, but there was nothing to explain the sound. Then the next night it happened again. This time I decided to take a closer look. As I approached the mirror, I noticed something strange. The surface was smeared with something. Not dust, not dirt, but something oily. Something that almost shimmered in the dim light of the hallway. I reached up to wipe it off, but as soon as my hand touched the glass, I felt it. The cold. A sharp, biting cold that sent a shiver up my spine. I pulled my hand away, but the smear remained. It didn't fade. And that's when I noticed it. The reflection. It wasn't me. I don't know how to explain it, but the reflection in the mirror, it wasn't mine. It was my face. But it looked different. Darker, almost twisted. Its eyes seemed to shift in the glass, no longer focused on me, but staring far away, as if it were looking at something behind me. I pulled away from the mirror, my heart racing, but the reflection, it didn't move with me. It stayed there watching, waiting. That's when I heard the whisper. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Help me. I ran. For the next few days, I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, a product of my tired mind. But things kept happening. More whispers, more strange reflections. I started avoiding the hallway entirely, walking past the mirror without looking. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting. The worst part was that the mirror kept calling me. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the soft whisper coming from the hallway. It grew louder each time, more desperate. Help me, it would plead, like someone was trapped behind the glass, banging to get out. One night, unable to resist, I stood in front of the mirror. I stared at my own reflection, trying to gather the courage to touch the glass. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached out, but before I could make contact, a cold hand gripped my wrist. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The mirror rippled like water. That's when I knew. The mirror wasn't just a reflection. It was a portal, a gateway to something waiting on the other side. And it wanted me. I couldn't escape it. Every time I walked past it, I felt it, an oppressive force like a weight on my chest. The reflection, now more distorted, began to change, taking on a form that wasn't mine. It grew bigger, its features more grotesque until it wasn't even human anymore. I had to leave, but when I tried, the door wouldn't open. The house had become a maze, trapping me inside. The mirror's whispers grew louder, frantic now. Help me, let me out. The thing on the other side wasn't pleading for release, it was demanding it. And that's when I realized the truth. The mirror wasn't just a portal, it was a prison. A prison that had been holding something for a long, long time, and now it wanted me to take its place. I couldn't get out of the house. No matter how many times I tried to leave, the mirror's pull kept drawing me back. My reflection now stood in the glass, smiling back at me, a smile that wasn't mine, stretching wider and wider, until I thought it would swallow me whole. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the reflection stepping out of the mirror. It was me. They say the house on Elm Street is abandoned now, but every so often someone reports hearing strange noises from the inside. The sound of footsteps in the hallways, the whispers that grow louder each night, And if you're brave enough to get close to the mirror, you might just see the last person who lived there, standing on the other side, smiling back at you. I never believed in ghosts. I thought the stories were just that. Stories, folklore, tall tales to scare children into behaving. And even after I moved into the old house on Rosewood Lane, I didn't expect anything to change my mind. The house was beautiful, tucked away in a quiet part of town surrounded by trees and overgrown ivy. It was perfect for someone like me, someone who just wanted a fresh start. When I first saw the house, it was love at first sight. The tall, gabled roof, the grand staircase inside, and the thick curtains that hung over the windows like something out of a Gothic novel. There was a feeling of weight to it, like it had history, like it had lived through decades of secrets. But I wasn't afraid of history. I was more intrigued. I moved in with nothing but the essentials, and my first night there was peaceful. No eerie noises, no mysterious bumps in the night. Just the sound of the wind against the walls and the faint creaks of the house settling. I slept like a rock, but that was only the beginning. A few days later, I noticed something strange. It started with the window. The room I had chosen as my study had a large bay window that overlooked the front yard. It was one of the things I loved most about the house. The view was calming, and the sun streamed in during the afternoon, making the room feel warm and inviting. But one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw something unusual. There was a shape in the window. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I watched, the figure grew clearer. It was the silhouette of a person, faint at first, then slowly becoming more defined. I blinked, and the figure was gone. I didn't think much of it. Probably just the shadows playing tricks on me. But it happened again the next night and the night after that. The figure was always there, just outside the window, barely visible but still unmistakable. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there. I tried to convince myself it was a reflection of the trees or the changing light, but no matter how I rationalized it, the feeling of being watched never went away. Then, one night, I heard it. A soft whisper. At first, it was barely audible, like a faint breeze carrying voices from a far-off place. But it grew louder, clearer. It wasn't in my ears. It was in my head. The voice was low and soft, like a lullaby sung in a language I didn't understand. "Come closer," it whispered. I froze. I tried to shake it off. It was just the wind. The old house creaked, and I was still getting used to the noises it made, but that whisper kept calling me, growing more urgent with each passing hour. "Come closer. I need you." I couldn't ignore it anymore. I walked to the window and slowly pulled the curtains aside. The figure was there, standing just outside the glass. This time, I could see it clearly. An old man, his face gaunt and pale, his eyes hollow, staring directly at me. I could feel his gaze piercing through the glass like it wasn't even there. The whisper came again, softer this time, but more insistent. "I am waiting. Come closer." I should have closed the curtains. I should have backed away, but I didn't. My hand moved on its own, reaching for the latch. Before I could stop myself, I opened the window. A gust of cold air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of decay. The figure didn't move, but I could hear it now. A low, rasping breath like it was struggling to speak. Its mouth moved, but no sound came out. The whisper was inside my head now, loud and clear. "You've let me in." I felt a cold hand wrap around my wrist. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The world spun around me. The house seemed to shrink, and the shadows in the room grew long and twisted, crawling along the walls like dark tendrils. I tried to pull away, but the grip on my wrist tightened, cold as ice. The figure's face pressed, closer to the glass, its eyes empty, hollow. "You've opened the window," it whispered. "Now you can never close it." The air in the room turned icy cold. The shadows seemed to grow, reaching toward me. I could hear them, whispers, low, voices all coming from inside the walls, inside the house. They were all around me, closing in, and I realized with a jolt that the figure wasn't the only one in the room. There were others, dozens of them, behind the walls, behind the mirrors, just out of sight, and they were all waiting, watching. Stumbled back from the window, panic setting in. My heart raced. I slammed the window shut, but the whispers didn't stop. They only grew louder. The figure was gone, but something else had entered. That night, I locked every window and every door. I sat in the corner of the room, shivering, listening to the whispers that seemed to come from every direction. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man's hollow eyes staring at me, waiting. I tried to leave the next day, packed up my things ready to run, but when I got to the front door, I couldn't open it. The handle was locked from the inside. I tried every window, every door. Nothing would open, and then I heard it again, the whispering. "Come back." It said, "Come closer." It never stops, and now I know the truth. It wasn't just the window I opened, it was the door to something else, something waiting, and now it's waiting for you. I had no intention of buying the portrait, it was an impulse. An odd decision I still can't quite explain. But there I was, standing in front of a flea market stall, staring at a weathered canvas that felt strange. The painting was of a woman, sitting elegantly in a chair with an expression that bordered between sadness and knowing. Her eyes were the most unsettling part. They followed me. No matter where I stood, her gaze remained locked on me. And somehow I knew that she wasn't just painted there. She was alive in a way that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't expensive. In fact, it was dirt cheap. The vendor seemed too eager to part with it, almost as though he wanted me to take it. The moment I asked how much, he rushed to pack it up, muttering something about the curse and too many had asked for it already. I should have walked away. I should have listened to that gut feeling telling me to run. But I didn't. Instead, I bought it. That night, I hung it in my living room, a perfect place above the fireplace. The moment the painting was on the wall, I felt an odd shift in the atmosphere. The air seemed thicker, colder, but I chalked it up to the old house. Maybe the heater was acting up. I tried to ignore the feeling that the woman in the painting was watching me. But every time I passed by it, I couldn't shake the sensation that her eyes followed me, even when I wasn't looking directly at her. The first night, the whispering started. At first, I thought it was the wind. Maybe the house was creaking, or perhaps the pipes were acting up again. But as the whispers grew louder, I realized they weren't coming from the house at all. They were coming from the painting. I froze. It was subtle at first, just a murmur of sound, like the rustle of pages turning in a faraway room. But then it became more distinct. I could hear words, soft, indecipherable, but unmistakably there. It was like the woman in the portrait was speaking to me, a voice that seemed to come from deep within the canvas itself. I couldn't understand it, but I could feel it in my bones. It was a voice that made my blood run cold. I tried to ignore it, to sleep through it. But the whispers grew more urgent, more demanding. They became clearer with each passing night until one evening I heard it clearly. "Come closer." I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, staring at the painting. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it or if it was real, but the words seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with an unnatural energy. I couldn't resist. I approached the painting cautiously, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I reached out to touch the frame, the room seemed to grow darker. The whispers turned into a low, throbbing hum that filled my ears. My hand was inches from the surface of the canvas when I felt something. A chill. Cold. Freezing. It was as if the painting itself had reached out and wrapped its fingers around my wrist. I jerked back, heart pounding. I stumbled backward, my chest tight with panic. And then I saw it. The woman's eyes. They were no longer sad. They were angry. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed with fear, but when I finally looked away, I could hear her voice, clearer than ever. "You're mine now." I ran out of the house, not stopping until I was standing in the street, breathing hard and shaking. But the worst part? I could still hear the whispers, even out there in the night. They followed me, trailing just behind my ears. I don't remember how I ended up back inside the house, but when I awoke, I was lying on the couch. The painting was still there, hanging on the wall. But now something was different. The woman's expression had changed. She was smiling, a dark, knowing smile. I left the house the next morning. I couldn't bear to stay there anymore. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The whispers had followed me. They were there in my mind like an echo I couldn't escape, and that was when I realized the woman wasn't just a part of the painting. She had become a part of me. She was inside my head, speaking to me, waiting. I tried to sell the painting. I tried to burn it, but no matter what I did, it always came back, and every night I can hear her whispering. "Come closer. Some doors should never be opened. Some things should never be found. And if you're ever in the mood to discover a hidden truth, you might want to think twice before you follow the whispers. Now, step away from the edges of the dark. There's something just out of sight in the next story, and it's waiting for you to make the first move." The house was perfect. At least that's what I told myself when I first saw it. A 2-story Victorian home tucked away on a quiet street in a sleepy town. It had everything I was looking for. Big windows, a cozy porch, a garden in the back. The price was shockingly low, but the realtor brushed it off with a smile. "There's just something about this place," she'd said. "It has a bit of character, you know." I nodded, even though the hairs on the back of my neck stood up when I stepped inside. The air was thick, stale with the scent of old wood and dust. The floors creaked beneath my feet, and the walls seemed to whisper, like the house had its own secrets. But I was desperate. After months of searching for a place to call home, I took the deal. It wasn't until I moved in that the true nature of the house began to reveal itself. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked, made some dinner, and spent the evening in the living room, trying to ignore the strange feeling that lingered in the air. There was something off about the house, something I couldn't put my finger on, but I pushed it aside. I was finally alone in my own space. That night, as I was lying in bed, I heard a soft tapping at the window. It was faint, almost like the wind brushing against the glass, but it was persistent. Tap, tap, tap. I got up and pulled the curtain aside, expecting to see a tree branch brushing the glass. But there was nothing. The window was clear. I convinced myself it was just my imagination or the wind playing tricks. But the next night the tapping returned. Tap, tap, tap. This time, I pulled the curtain back faster, but once again, Nothing. Just the dark street, empty, as it had been when I moved in. I told myself it was probably an animal or a neighbor messing around, but something in my gut told me that wasn't it. A few days passed, and the tapping grew louder. It became an almost rhythmic sound, a soft beat that seemed to come from the window every night at exactly 2 a.m. And no matter how many times I checked, there was never anything there. No branches, no creatures, just emptiness. I started to sleep with the blinds closed, but it didn't help. The tapping didn't stop. It was as if the sound was inside the house, not coming from the outside at all. One evening I decided I had enough. I was going to find out what was causing it. I waited by the window, sitting in the dark with only the faint light of the street lamp casting a dim glow in the room. As the clock struck 2 a.m., the tapping began, just like it always did. I waited, heart pounding, staring at the window. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, until it was a rapid succession of strikes against the glass. I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped up and yanked open the blinds, and that's when I saw him. A man. His face pressed against the glass, his wide, empty eyes staring at me. His skin was pale, his lips cracked and dry. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, his face twisted into an expression that could only be described as pure, empty hunger. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, my breath catching in my throat, but the man didn't move. He just stayed there, frozen in place, his eyes locked onto mine. I screamed. But as soon as the sound escaped my lips, he was gone. No trace of him, not a single footprint in the dirt outside. He vanished as if he had never been there. My hands shook as I pulled the blinds down, trying to process what had just happened. Was I dreaming? Was it some trick of the light? But I knew it wasn't. I knew what I had seen. The next morning I went outside to investigate, thinking maybe it was some sort of sick joke or prank. But there was nothing. No sign of the man, no footprints, not even a hint that anyone had been standing there. I tried to forget about it, but the tapping continued, night after night. And soon, it wasn't just the window. It was the door too, and the walls, the ceilings. The whole house began to feel alive, as if something was moving within it, tapping at the corners, scratching at the windows, whispering from the shadows. I tried to leave, but no matter what direction I went in, the house always pulled me back. The man at the window wasn't the only thing that haunted me now. The house itself had become a prison, trapping me inside its walls, keeping me in the dark. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear the tapping, the scraping, the whispering. The man would come again, his hollow, eyes boring into mine as I lay in bed, frozen in fear. Eventually, I couldn't take it any longer. I packed up what little I had left and left the house for good. But as I walked away, I heard it, the tapping. It followed me down the street. I turned around one last time and looked at the house, and that's when I saw him again, standing at the window just as before, his face pressed against the glass, his eyes watching me. I ran. I never went back. But every time I close my eyes, I hear the tapping, and I wonder if he's still waiting for me just behind the glass. Some things can never be outrun. Some places never let you go. And in the next story, there's something that has been hiding in the dark, just waiting for someone like you to come along. It was an old house, too old in fact. I should have known better. The minute I stepped into the place, something in the back of my mind whispered that it was wrong. But the price was right. Too right. I didn't think much of it then. After, all I needed a place to stay, and I was running out of options. The landlord, a wiry old man with gray hair and trembling hands, handed me the keys with a faint smile. "The house has character," he said. "It's been here a long time. You'll get used to it." But there was something unsettling in his voice that I couldn't quite place. It didn't take long for the house to make its presence known. The first night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the sound of creaking wood and distant groans filling the silence. I chalked it up to the house settling, a natural thing for any old structure. But then, I heard it. A whisper. It was soft at first, barely audible, like the sound of the wind. I sat up, straining my ears to hear better. The whisper seemed to come from beneath the floor, a faint murmur like voices from a far-off dream. I told myself it was nothing. The house was old, the pipes could be rattling, maybe even the wind moving through the cracks. But the next night it was there again. And this time it wasn't just a whisper. The voice was clearer now, as if it were right beneath my bed, speaking in a language I didn't understand. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, trying to ignore it. But the whisper grew louder, more insistent, as though it were trying to make me hear it, understand it. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew what it wanted. It wanted my attention. It wanted me to listen. The next day, I checked the floorboards, thinking maybe it was just the house settling again. Maybe a rodent had gotten in. But everything seemed normal. There were no signs of damage, no loose boards, no holes where anything could hide. Yet when the night came, the whispering returned. I decided to ignore it. I had to. I couldn't let myself get caught up in this nonsense. But the whispering wouldn't stop. It followed me through the house, echoing through the walls, the floors, the ceilings. It was driving me mad. One night, unable to take it any longer, I grabbed a flashlight and crawled beneath the house. The darkness was thick down there, a pressing weight that seemed to swallow up the light. The air smelled of mildew and damp earth. I crawled through the crawl space, the ground beneath me soft with wet soil. My flashlight flickered as I moved, further in, and that's when I saw it. A small, rotting box was tucked away in the far corner, hidden beneath a pile of debris. I hesitated for a moment before reaching out to grab it. The instant my fingers touched the box, the whispering stopped. Froze. The silence was suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly turned the box over in my hands. There were no markings on it, nothing to indicate what it was or why it had been hidden there. But as I opened it, I felt a chill creep over me. Inside was a faded, yellowed piece of paper, and on it was a single word: help. The paper disintegrated the moment I touched it, crumbling to dust in my hands. Suddenly, the ground beneath me began to shake. I heard scratching sounds, like claws scraping against wood. I scrambled to my feet, but before I could move, something cold and slimy wrapped around my ankle. I screamed, trying to break free, but the grip tightened, pulling me back toward the darkness. I was dragged across the dirt, my hands scraping against the cold earth. I could hear the whispers again, louder than ever, the voices now clear, demanding, pleading, "Help us." The floorboards above me creaked and groaned as though something heavy was moving around upstairs. The house seemed alive, pulsing with an energy I couldn't understand. I fought to break free, kicking and pulling, but the thing beneath me was strong. It felt like it was pulling me toward the heart of the house, into the place where the whispers began. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the force stopped. The grip loosened, and I was left lying on the cold dirt floor beneath the house, gasping for breath. I don't know how long I lay there, but eventually I managed to stand, my legs trembling beneath me. The house was quiet again. too quiet. I crawled out from beneath the floor, the flashlight still in my hand. When I stood up and looked around, I could see the dust settling in the air, the faint, oppressive weight of the house pressing down on me. I didn't leave. I couldn't. But the whispers never stopped. They were always there, underneath the floorboards, in the walls, in the air, waiting. When I moved out a week later, the landlord wasn't there to say goodbye. His house had been empty for years, he told me. He never mentioned a thing about what was beneath it. But when I closed the door behind me, I heard it again, the whisper. It followed me, and it always would. Some things never stay buried. Some voices never fade. I never thought a photograph could be more than just a picture. It was always just a frozen moment in time. Nothing more than a way to hold on to memories, a little piece of the past. But that was before I found the picture in the attic. It was an old black and white photo. The kind that's so faded you can barely make out the details, but it still managed to evoke a strange, unsettling feeling. The photo showed a group of people standing in front of a house, smiling. But there was something off about it. I had found the photo while I was going through boxes in the attic of the house I had just moved into. I had bought the place cheap, not that I cared about the price. Money wasn't the issue for me. It was the fact that it was an old house, the kind that oozed history, its creaky floors and musty air adding to its charm. When I pulled out the box, I didn't expect to find anything more than old furniture, forgotten trinkets, and dust. But the photo was nestled between some old letters and tarnished silverware, tucked away like a secret someone had tried to hide. There was something about the photo that immediately caught my attention. The house in the background looked so familiar, though I couldn't place why. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of the unease crawling under my skin. The people in the photo were smiling, but it was a stiff, forced kind of smile, as if they were posing for something they didn't want to be part of. The man in the middle was the one who stood out to me the most. He had a dark, sharp look to him, something unsettling about his eyes. They seemed too dark, too intense. But what bothered me the most was that his eyes weren't smiling. He was looking at the camera, yes, but it felt like he was looking at me. I turned the photo over, hoping to find a clue, a name, a date, something that would explain why I felt such a connection to it. But there was nothing, just blank space. That's when I heard it, a soft knock on the attic door. I froze. I had been alone in the house, or so I thought. I slowly set the photo down on the dusty table and went toward the door, my heart pounding. The air in the attic felt colder now, like the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. I opened the door, expecting to see the landlord or one of the neighbors, someone who had wandered in by mistake. But no one was there, just silence. A silence that felt too heavy, too suffocating. I shook my head, trying to brush off the feeling. I closed the door and turned to go back to the photo, but something was wrong. The man in the picture was no longer in the middle. He had moved. I blinked. The photo was exactly the same as before, but somehow different. The man was standing, slightly to the left now, his eyes fixed on me. My pulse quickened. I walked up to the photo, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. I stared at the man's eyes again, and this time I swore I saw something shift in them, something almost alive. They weren't just dark anymore. They were watching me, waiting. I threw the photo down on the table and backed away, my mind racing. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a photograph. Old, faded, nothing more. but the chill in the air had only deepened, and the longer I stared at the photo, the more I felt the urge to look back at the man's eyes. I fought the impulse, but it was getting harder to resist. Something about those eyes, it was like they were calling to me. Then the whispering started. It was faint at first, like a distant voice, but it grew louder. It was coming from the photo. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. The man's eyes were speaking, sending a message that only I could hear. "Come closer," the whisper said. "Come closer and see." I felt my legs move before I could stop them, my body moving toward the table as if it had a mind of its own. My hands reached out, trembling, and I grabbed the photo. I felt a pull in my chest, like something was yanking me into the image, like I was falling toward it. My breath quickened, my heart racing in my chest. I stumbled backward, dropping the photo. When it hit the ground, the whispering stopped. For a moment, everything was still. But as I bent to pick up the photo, something new caught my eye. A reflection. In the corner of the glass just beside the frame, the man from the photo was standing in the reflection, his face contorted into an expression of pure malice. His eyes were wide open, dark and lifeless, staring directly at me. But this time he wasn't smiling. He was grinning, and his grin was far too wide, far too sharp. I dropped the photo again and backed away, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, too heavy, like it was watching me. The man in the picture was always there, lurking in the back of my mind, his eyes following me wherever I went. It wasn't until a week later that I saw him again. This time it wasn't through the photograph. I was walking through the house when I saw him, standing in the doorway of the hallway just out of the corner of my eye. I froze, my blood turning cold. But when I turned to look directly at him, there was no one there. The whispering had returned, now louder than ever. "Come closer," it beckoned. "Come closer and you'll understand." I don't know how long I stood there staring at the empty doorway. I could still hear his voice, still feel his presence, just beyond my reach. The next day, I moved out of the house. I didn't tell anyone why. I didn't have to. I left everything behind. The house, the photo, and the man who had been haunting me from the other side of the frame. But as I was walking away, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I turned, half expecting to see him standing there in the distance, but all I saw was a shadow in the window of the house. His eyes were watching me, and they always would be. Some things never let go. They follow you. They wait for you. And in the next story, the past comes alive in ways you can't escape. I had just moved into the house on Maple Street. It was a beautiful old home, 2 stories tall with tall, arched windows and a sweeping staircase. The kind of house that you could imagine being in the middle of an old black and white movie. It had everything I was looking for: space, character, and most importantly, it was cheap. At first, I didn't think twice about the price. Sure, there were rumors about the house, whispers of strange happenings, mysterious disappearances, but those were just stories. The kind of things you hear when a house is old, and when you live in a town as small as mine. Everyone has a story, right? But that was before the first night. The first night I heard the knock. It wasn't like a regular knock. It was soft, almost gentle, like someone tapping their fingers on the door. I figured it was probably one of the neighbors, maybe someone welcoming me to the street or offering me advice about the house. But when I opened the door, there was no one there, just the silence of the night. I closed the door, dismissing it, as a trick of my tired mind. After all, I'd just moved in and the excitement and stress of the day had worn me down. But then the knock came again. This time, louder. I froze. It was coming from the back door. With my heart racing, I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the kitchen where the door was. My breath caught in my throat as I approached it slowly, every step echoing in the quiet house. I reached out and slowly turned the handle. Nothing. The door was locked. And yet, I could have sworn I heard it. The knock. It was like a whisper, just beyond the reach of my hearing. A soft tap, 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 tap. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I quickly checked the back door, the windows, and everything seemed fine. No one could have gotten in. I went to bed that night, the sound still lingering in my ears. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, the house settling or the wind pushing against the walls. But the knock came again, and this time, it didn't stop. It started just after midnight. At first, it was a gentle knock, soft, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. But then it grew louder, harder. Each knock seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, rattling the house. I got up, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed the flashlight again, stepping into the hallway. The house was dark, the shadows dancing on the walls. I moved toward the door at the end of the hall, where the sound was coming from. The closer I got, the louder the knocking became, until it sounded like it was right in front of me. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I turned it slowly, my breath catching in my throat. And then the door swung open. There was no one there. Just the silence. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My breath misted in the air as if the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. I stepped inside, the room dark and cold, and there it was, the source of the sound. A rocking chair. It was in the corner of the room, its wooden frame creaking as it slowly rocked back and forth. I stepped closer, my eyes fixed on the chair. The floorboards creaked under my feet, but the chair continued to rock, its motion steady and deliberate. I glanced around the room, searching for an explanation, but there was nothing. Nothing but the rocking chair. Then, from behind me, I heard it again. The knocking. Soft at first. Tap, tap, tap. And then louder. Harder. The walls seemed to reverberate with the sound, and I felt my stomach twist into knots. I whipped around, scanning the room for any sign of movement. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the hallway light. The room was now completely dark except for the dim glow of the flashlight in my trembling hand. And then, I saw it. A shadow moved across the wall, just in the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the chair, still rocking, its rhythm unchanged. But the knocking didn't stop. It was everywhere now. It was coming from inside the walls, inside the floorboards, as if the house itself was alive, breathing in the night. And that's when I heard the voice. It was faint at first, a whisper just barely audible over the sound of the knocking. It seemed to come from the chair itself. "Let me in." I backed away slowly, my heart racing, but my legs felt like lead. I could barely breathe. The voice grew louder, more insistent. "Let me in." The rocking chair started to move faster, its motion becoming more frantic. The knocking grew louder, and the whispers turned into a voice. A voice that was no longer begging, but demanding. I ran. I didn't know how I managed to get back to the hallway. I didn't even remember leaving the room. All I knew was that I had to get out. The door, the back door, any way out of this nightmare. I bolted downstairs, and just as I reached the front door, I heard the final deafening knock. A bang so loud it felt like it had shattered the air itself. The door opened before I even touched the handle, and I fled into the night. I never went back to that house. They say it's still there, sitting on Maple Street, waiting for someone else to move in, to hear the knocks, to feel the cold breath on their neck, to hear the whispers. And if you ever pass by, if you ever stop to look at the house, you might see something in the window, a shadow, a shape, a figure, and you'll hear the whisper too. Let me in. Some things never leave the house. They wait for the next person to unlock the door. And in the next story, something even darker is about to enter. I never thought I'd be the type of person to believe in strange occurrences, in the supernatural, or in anything that couldn't be explained. I was a man of logic, grounded in reality. But one night, everything changed. It started like any other evening. I had just finished a late shift at the bar and was on my way home. The streets were empty, the city quiet, with only the soft hum of streetlights and the occasional passing car. It was around 2 a.m. when I noticed it. An old black sedan parked near the curb. It wasn't unusual to see cars parked at night, but this one seemed out of place. It was a model from the 80s, the kind of car that looked like it had been abandoned for years. The windows were tinted too darkly and there was no one inside. Still, there was something unsettling about it, like I wasn't supposed to be there. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing. But as I walked past the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and for some reason, I found myself glancing over my shoulder. The street was empty, save for that one car. That's when I heard the whisper. It was barely a sound at first, a soft rustling, like someone shifting in the seat of the car. I turned, expecting to see someone there, someone who had been waiting in the shadows. But the car was still empty. No movement, no sign of life. I took a deep breath and turned back to keep walking, but then something strange happened. The car started. The engine roared to life with a suddenness that made me jump. The headlights flickered on, blinding me momentarily before the car began to roll slowly down the street right behind me. I could hear the tires on the asphalt, the hum of the engine as it followed me. I didn't dare look back. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and my pace quickened. I didn't know who or what was behind me, but something told me I needed to get home. Fast. I rounded the corner, hoping to lose the car, but the engine revved louder. The headlights followed me, and the whispering returned. This time clearer, more distinct, like a voice calling my name. Darren. It was a soft, breathy voice, almost as if it were right behind me. I didn't stop to see if there was someone in the car or what was going on. My legs pumped faster, my heart racing. I turned another corner, hoping the car would be forced to stop at the red light. But when I looked over my shoulder, I saw it wasn't slowing down. The car was coming. After me, I ran harder, but the sound of the engine, the tires on the pavement, was getting closer. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment building and slammed the door behind me, locking it quickly. I stood there, panting, trying to calm my breathing, my hands trembling. But then I heard it again, the whisper, "Darren, you can't hide." I froze. There was no one in my apartment. I was alone. The voice was in my head. I walked slowly to the window and peeked out from behind the curtains. The car was parked right in front of the building, its headlights dimmed, the engine still running. I should have called the police, I should have told someone, but I didn't. I was paralyzed with fear, unsure of what to do. The whisper continued. "I'm waiting for you, Darren. I know where you live." I turned away from the window and backed into the living room. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps, as if someone were walking outside the building, just beyond my door. They stopped at my door. The car's headlights flickered out and all was silent. Then the doorbell rang. Slowly, I walked over and peered through the peephole. Nothing. I opened the door a crack, and just as I did, the light flickered on in the hallway. I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving along the walls. The car was gone, but the whisper still lingered in my ears. I never saw that car again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching me. And the worst part? That voice. It never left. It whispered in my ear when I went to bed, when I walked down the street, when I sat at my kitchen table, and one day when I least expected it. I was walking home from the store when I saw it again. The same black sedan, parked on the same street. It was waiting for me. In the next story, we'll follow a journey to a place that was meant to remain forgotten, but some places don't want to be left alone. I always loved the old library. It wasn't the kind of library that most people would think of when they imagined a place filled with books. It wasn't grand or filled with the latest bestsellers. In fact, it was a little rundown, hidden away, on a quiet street that most people passed by without a second glance. But for me, it had a pull, a strange allure. The musty smell of old pages, the squeak of the floorboards underfoot, the sound of the wind howling outside. It was like the library had a soul of its own, one that whispered to me in the dead of night. I'd been visiting for years. After all, it was the only place in town that still had the kinds of books I liked. Books that weren't meant for the mainstream audience. Forgotten histories, obscure legends, and volumes that seemed to carry an air of forbidden knowledge. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Harper, was the keeper of the place, and, though she always seemed a little strange, I had never thought much of it. She was just a little eccentric, the kind of person who preferred the company of books to people. But one night, everything changed. It was a Wednesday, late in the evening, when I decided to visit after hours. The library had closed, but I had a key. I'd grown close to Mrs. Harper over the years, and she trusted me to come in whenever I wanted. That night I had an odd feeling in my stomach, a sense of unease, but I dismissed it as nothing more than the weight of a long day. I slipped through the back door, which creaked as it opened. The familiar scent of paper and ink filled my lungs, comforting me. I walked down the narrow aisles, running my fingers along the spines of the books, marveling at the hidden gems that waited on each shelf. That's when I noticed something strange. The back corner of the library, where the older, more obscure books were kept, was darker than usual. There were no lights there, and I usually liked the solitude of that shadowy part of the building. But tonight the darkness seemed thicker, almost oppressive. I approached the corner, curiosity bubbling up inside me. As I stepped closer, I realized that one of the shelves had been moved. Not a big movement, just a few inches, but enough that I could see a gap between the bookshelves. It wasn't there before. I pushed gently on the shelf, and to my surprise, it slid open with an eerie quietness. My heart skipped a beat. This was new. I'd been in this library more times than I could count, and I knew this space well. There was never a hidden door. The space beyond the shelf was narrow, barely wide, enough for me to fit through. But the curiosity that gripped me was stronger than any caution, and I squeezed into the dark hallway beyond. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were lined with books, but not the kind I was used to. These were old, their covers torn, their pages yellowed with age, and the smell, It wasn't the familiar scent of old paper and ink. It was something worse, like decay, or something that had been left to rot for too long. I stepped forward, my footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. The hallway stretched on longer than I expected, and with each step, the air grew colder. It felt wrong, as if the very space around me was pushing back, resisting my presence. As I walked deeper, I saw a door at the end of the hall, a wooden door with no handle. It was old, with deep scratches in the wood, as though something had tried. To claw its way out, I hesitated. Something deep inside me screamed not to open that door, but I couldn't stop myself. I reached for the doorknob, except there was no knob, no handle, nothing, just smooth wood. My heart pounded in my chest. I placed my palm against the door, and without even thinking, it swung open. The room beyond was dark, but there was a faint glow like the flickering of candles. I stepped inside and the door slammed shut behind me. I turned around, expecting to see the narrow hallway I had just walked through, but instead, there was only a thick, impenetrable darkness. The room was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a vast, circular space, the walls lined with ancient, tattered bookshelves. And in the center of the room, there was a single chair. The chair was made of dark wood, with intricate carvings that twisted and turned into shapes I couldn't understand. In the chair sat something that at first I couldn't make out. It was a figure, human but not quite. It had the shape of a person, but the skin was gray, stretched tight over the bones, as if it had been there for far too long. I couldn't move. The room was suffocating, the air thick with something heavy, as if the walls themselves were watching me. I tried to speak, to say something, but my throat was tight. The figure in the chair tilted its head, its hollow eyes staring at me, and then it spoke. "Why have you come?" The voice was raspy, a sound like old leaves being crunched underfoot, but it held an unsettling authority, like it had been waiting for me. I didn't mean to," I stammered. I didn't know this place existed." The figure's eyes glowed faintly. "But you knew," it whispered, its voice slithering like a serpent. "You always knew. You were always meant to find." I backed away, my heart racing, but no matter how far I moved, it felt like the room was growing smaller, the walls pressing in on me. "What is this place?" I managed to choke out. "This is where the lost books are kept," it said, the words dripping like poison. "The books that should never have been read. The stories that were never meant to see the light of day." I froze, the realization dawning on me. I had read one of those books before, a forbidden text, one that I thought was just a myth. But now I understood. The figure in the chair slowly stood, its movements jerky like it was fighting to hold itself together. It extended a hand toward me, long bony fingers curling into a claw. "You shouldn't have opened the door," it whispered. "Now you belong to the books." And before I could scream, the room went black. In the last tale, we'll venture into the unknown once more, where the shadows are darker and the secrets even darker still. I'd always considered myself an average person, nothing too special, just living my life, going through the motions. I wasn't one for superstition or anything beyond what I could see with my own eyes. Ghosts, hauntings, the supernatural, they were all just stories, things to keep you entertained on a dark night, nothing more. That's what I told myself. But the reflection I saw one morning, that shattered everything I thought I knew. It all started with a move. I had just relocated to a new apartment in a city I barely knew. The kind of place that seemed to exist only in the background of the world, tucked away between the more glamorous districts, a forgotten part of town. My new apartment was in an old building, dusty with walls that creaked and floors that groaned under the weight of time. But it was cheap, and that was all I needed. A roof over my head, a place to rest. That was my only concern. The first morning, I woke up in the new place. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror brushing my teeth. The mirror was old, its frame covered in layers of chipped, peeling paint. I hadn't thought much of it the night before, but now, as I stared at myself, I felt an odd sensation. It wasn't fear, not at first. It was something off. The kind of feeling you get when you sense something isn't right but can't quite put your finger on it. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired from the move, or maybe I had simply been alone for too long. But when I looked into my own eyes, I saw it. It wasn't me. My reflection smiled at me, too widely, too perfectly. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth. The smile in the mirror wasn't the one I was wearing. It was different. The eyes, there was something cold about them, something hollow. And the way my reflection grinned at me, it felt wrong. I dropped my toothbrush. I turned away from the mirror, my pulse quickening. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, some weird optical illusion. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something was horribly wrong. I avoided the mirror for the rest of the day. I didn't want to look at it again. Didn't want to risk seeing that twisted reflection smiling back at me. But as the day turned to night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something that wasn't quite right. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me like a weight. I heard the sound of something scratching in the walls, a faint noise that made my skin crawl. It was probably just rats, I told myself, but when I closed my eyes, I could still hear it, scratching, whispering, clawing its way through the dark. Finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, but my dreams were restless. In my dream, I stood in front of the same bathroom mirror, but this time, I wasn't alone. There was something behind me, something that mirrored my every move, but not quite. Turned around and there it was, a dark figure standing in the doorway. It was a shadow, but it had the shape of a person. I couldn't make out any details, just the dark outline of its figure. But what chilled me the most were its eyes. Empty, black pits that seemed to pull me in. I reached out, but my hand passed right through it. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, it just stood there watching, and then I saw it. In the reflection of the mirror, the figure smiled. The same twisted, perfect grin from earlier. Only this time, it wasn't my reflection. It was the shadow's. I woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat. My heart was racing and the room felt stifling, as if the air had thickened while I was asleep. I reached for the lamp on the nightstand, my fingers trembling, and turned it on. The light flickered before it stabilized, but it didn't help. The feeling of being watched didn't go away. The next day I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to face the mirror. When I stepped in front of it again, I hesitated. For a moment I stood still, staring at my reflection. It was the same as always. Me, looking tired but normal. But I couldn't shake the sense that something was different. The reflection seemed just a little too still, too perfect. I leaned in closer to the mirror, my breath fogging up the glass. As I did, the reflection shifted. Just a fraction, but enough that I could see it. The reflection of the smile. It was wrong. I backed away quickly, my heart thumping in my chest. But as I turned to leave the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. A movement. I turned back, but there was nothing. Just the reflection of the bathroom, the same as before. I didn't know what to do. I thought about leaving the apartment, but something kept me there, like a force pulling me back. I thought about calling someone, but who would believe me? No one could understand the terror I felt. That night I could hear it again. The scratching, the whispering. But this time it was louder, closer. It was coming from the mirror. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to the bathroom, almost tripping over my own feet, and threw open the door. The reflection was waiting for me, but it wasn't just a reflection anymore. It had stepped out of the mirror. I froze, unable to move, unable to scream. The thing, my reflection, stood there, its eyes hollow and empty, its grin stretched too wide. It didn't speak, didn't need to. It just reached out toward me, its fingers long and twisted like claws. I turned and ran, but it was already behind me, its cold breath on my neck. I could hear its laughter, hollow and echoing, and it wasn't my laugh, it was something else, something dark. I ran through the apartment, desperate, but no matter where I went, I couldn't escape it. The mirror had followed me into the world, and it was never going to let me go. I don't know how long I've been running, but the reflection is still here. It watches me, smiles at me, follows me wherever I go. And now, as I sit here, I wonder if you're listening carefully enough. If you hear the faint scratching behind you, the cold breath on your neck, maybe the mirror's watching you too.